Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse, and before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains so small. And today, we are going to discuss locomotives again, but this time we're going to talk about very specific ones that, despite being on the small side, like they aren't the largest locomotives ever, they're alarmingly powerful for their size, and it's just weird. It's one of those things. These are 5 very small trains that are way more powerful than you'd think. The Southern Railway V-Class, or more commonly known as the Schools Class. These were a group of 40 440 steam locomotives that were constructed between 1930 and 1935. 440? Wait a minute, we know what that is. Those are the types that are usually called American, although these were built in the UK. And by the 1930s, that wheel arrangement was kind of old school, pretty obsolete, honestly. Why 440? Well, it seems to be down to overhang. They wanted the frame to be shortened, so there wouldn't be as much overhang on the line's tight curves where it was meant to run. But with less driving wheels, that would limit it in a way, or it should have, but no, not really. These are considered the most powerful 440s ever produced in all of Europe. Their total tractive effort was over 25,000 pounds of force, which is really high for an American. Southern Railway's employees that worked on them actually found them great. They actually had better tractive effort than the technically more powerful King Arthur class, which were 460s. This of course meant that their axles were really highly loaded, at about 21 tons. But it worked, and lasted a decent amount of time, until British Railways took over. I knew you would show up at some point. Throughout the modernization plan, they began to be withdrawn, and to be fair, they were pretty old by that point, and they completely disappeared from the lines by December of 1962. Although there are a few still in preservation, 3 to be precise. Cheltenham, Repton, and Stowe are all still around. Repton is actually operational as I speak, and the other 2 are dealing with overhauls to make them operational again. So hey, a pretty nice story from an awesomely powerful, if not rather small, American steam locomotive, which was built by the UK. That gets really confusing. The General Electric -8-40BW, sometimes called just the B40-8W, which is not really a shortened way to say that. I'm just going to call it the 40BW to save time. It's a 4-axle diesel locomotive that was built by General Electric, specifically for the Santa Fe Railway, in the late 80s and early 90s. It's part of the -8 series, and naturally that means they have questionable turbochargers, because of course they do. But, if you hadn't noticed, these are only 2 axles, which are on the small side for hood units. Not very large by diesel standards, especially American ones. But their power output would not indicate that. Their max speed is 70 miles per hour, which is good, but their power rating is 4,000 horsepower. Which, yo, what? I'm pretty sure there's some 6-axle diesels that have less of a power rating than that. That's really impressive given their size, and their tractive effort is 68,000 pounds. But Santa Fe wound up being the only one to purchase this particular model of diesel. And when they merged with Burlington Northern and became BNSF, most of them passed to them, and some are still in operation now. A few others were sold off: Providence and Worcester Railroad, Nashville and Eastern Railroad, Arkansas-Oklahoma Railroad, and Great Western Railway of Saskatchewan. So they've been pretty successful, and with that power rating and that size, I can't say I'm surprised by that. The EMD AEM-7. Hey, we've talked about these before. The AEM-7 was actually based off of the RC4, a Swedish electric locomotive that was imported for testing purposes on Amtrak. Amtrak was trying to replace the unsuccessful General Electric E60s that they'd been struggling with. And EMD used the RC4 as a basis and came out with the AEM-7. And they were great. Built between 1978 and 1988, a total of 65 were produced, and they were retired by Amtrak in 2016. Mark and SEPTA also used them. retiring them in 2017 and 2018 respectively. They had an impressively long career, and they're really not that large, though electric locomotives tend to have higher horsepower ratings than others, purely because, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. When it comes to diesels and steam engines, the power has to be produced in the engine. But with electrics that are operating off of an overhead wire or even a third rail, they're not actually producing any power, if you think about it. The power is being produced elsewhere by a power plant. They're just taking power into their motors. So, in theory, you could argue that you could pack a lot more potential into an electric locomotive than you could a diesel or a steam engine. How much exactly was in these little things? Well, their max speed was 125 miles per hour, 201 kilometers per hour, which is pretty good. Their power output, potentially, was 7,000 horsepower. That's 5.2 megawatts. Why? Why? Why did you need that? Why did you ever need that much horsepower? These are passenger locomotives. Passenger trains aren't that heavy. At least when you compare them to freight trains. Good lord. But to be frank, it seemed the horsepower was mostly going into maintaining the speed, as their tractive effort really wasn't that high. Their starting was close to 52,000 pounds of force, and they could operate a continuous around 28,000 pounds of force. That's not super high compared to some others, but that horsepower is still pretty impressive, and they were good, genuinely so. That's why they lasted so long. Their retirement was actually kind of a sad day for Amtrak, as people genuinely liked them, gotten used to seeing them over the years. I rode on trains in Amtrak that were pulled by them, and no longer is that really possible. Though a few did get preserved. 2 of the Amtraks were, and Mark still has their units stored, apparently. 2 of the Amtraks were also sold to Caltrain, so they are still around. The FM H-12-44. What a mouthful. I'm just going to call it the H-12-44. These are switchers, or shunters if you live in the UK. Diesel electrics built by Fairbanks Morse, from May 1950 until March 1961. Fairbanks Morse is an interesting company in locomotive history. They had a significant obsession with opposed piston engine prime movers. In this case, these were 6 cylinders. And the H-12-44s were actually indistinguishable from their predecessor, the H-10-44s, but their internals were not the same. See, switchers, or shunters, don't necessarily need to be that powerful. It's not necessary. They're usually used for pulling very short trains, sometimes even moving individual cars around the yards, so you don't need that much power out of them. But in this case, Fairbanks Morse kinda overcompensated a little bit, if you ask me. From a horsepower perspective, switchers are usually around 800 on the high end. Sometimes they can approach 1,000, but that's pretty unusual. In this case, this thing hit 1,200 horsepower, 1,200, and with a tractive effort over 40,000, and a maximum speed of 60. Why? Why did you need all that? It's a switcher, you guys. It doesn't need to do any of that. But they were pretty successful. They wound up producing 336. As with that power output for their size, and the fact that they were pretty reliable, they were incredibly useful to have around the yards. Many different railways bought them, and several are actually in preservation. 16 in total. And that's not bad at all. Pretty good for an historical locomotive. The DRG Class 80. Hey look, a tank engine. And look at it! It's so cute! Oh my goodness, it's so small. That is, like, adorable. They were built between 1927 and 1928. 39 were made for the Deutsche Reichsbahn. And of course they were meant for shunting duties. These are tiny little switcher tank engines, so you wouldn't expect them to be quite that powerful. Well, okay, these are weird though. See, they have an indicated power rating, which is 567 horsepower, or 423 kilowatts. That doesn't sound like a lot, because it isn't. However, I'm pretty sure that is a lie, because these things are known for pulling way heavier trains than they have any business pulling. And you have to remember, that is the indicated power. Indicated power is different from actual power output, because that's just what the manufacturer indicates within the locomotive tolerances. That doesn't mean it can't do more than that, and the Class 80 did, often, despite being one of the smallest locomotives on the lines. They've been known to haul freight trains totaling 1,000 tons, without effort. That indicated power is such a vile and odious lie. Don't you pretend like it's not. The Germans. They're hiding something from us. What precision engineering did you put into these? Explain yourself. They also lasted an incredible amount of time, partly due to the political issues surrounding Germany, but still, it's pretty impressive. The last one wasn't actually withdrawn until 1977, when they were still working as industrial locomotives, and 7 of these little devils are still preserved, some in operating condition, and that's pretty impressive, if you ask me. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders: Thomas Ward, Some Dude 267, Orange Glass, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hoth 444, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsu 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Master of None, Josh Johnson, Metal for Life Guy, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, DM Tribal Typhoon, Tommy Rossini, Ohio Trucker 1, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Joshua Long, Alaric Jaspers, Bry Dagger 8, Twin Fox, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, and Major Klutz. Till next time, this is Darkness, Individual Alphon, farewell.